The police eventually brought in a few experts from the city who searched every inch of the building, the attic, the basement, even behind the walls. But nothing. No hidden passages, no crawl spaces, no way out of that locked room. Finally, after weeks of dead ends, the case was quietly closed. Unresolved disappearance, the report said. The file gathered dust in a drawer and was eventually forgotten. But for the people who lived nearby, it never ended. Because long after the investigation was over, they still saw the flicker of a light in room 9 whenever a storm rolled in. After the disappearance, Hollow Inn was never truly empty. Even when the doors were locked and the windows boarded shut, locals claimed the building was awake. A few years later, a pair of travelers got caught in a storm while passing through town. They saw the faint glow of Hollow Inn's sign through the rain and thought it was still open. The doors, surprisingly, weren't locked. The place smelled of dust and damp wood, but the fireplace in the lobby was burning. Fresh logs, flames steady. They assumed someone must live there. But when they called out, no one answered. They stayed only long enough to get warm, then left a note saying, "Thank you," on the counter. The next morning, they returned to retrieve a forgotten map. The fire was cold. The note was gone. And on the counter was another piece of paper, in the same handwriting, that simply read, "You're welcome." In another instance, a group of teens broke in on a dare. They wanted to spend the night and film proof that the place was haunted. But only one of them made it till morning. He ran home pale and shaking, insisting he heard someone whispering his name from the top of the stairs. When the police went to check, all the footage from their camera had been wiped clean, except for the final 5 seconds. It showed an open door at the end of the hallway, slowly closing by itself. Others told stories of passing by the inn on foggy nights and seeing a man standing by the upstairs window, staring out at the road. Always the same window. Always the same shadow. And when someone finally dared to look closer, the window was found locked from the inside. No matter how many years passed, every few months, a new story surfaced. A traveler hearing footsteps, a driver spotting a light upstairs, a whisper carried by the wind. It seemed Hollow Inn refused to fade into history. It wanted to be remembered. Today, Hollow Inn still stands, but barely. Its roof sags, the paint is peeling, and ivy crawls up the walls like nature's slow attempt to reclaim it. Most of the windows are shattered, yet somehow the one belonging to room 9 remains perfectly intact. Locals say no matter how many storms hit the valley, that single pane of glass never cracks. The building has become a quiet landmark of sorts, the kind that people drive past but never approach. Teenagers still dare each other to step inside, but most lose their nerve at the gate. Some say the air around it feels heavy, like the moment before lightning strikes. A few paranormal investigators have tried to document what goes on inside. Cameras glitch, batteries drain, and voices appear in recordings that no one remembers hearing. One group claimed that when they played back their footage later, they caught something impossible. The faint sound of a man checking in, a voice saying, "One night, please." Even the new owners of the land have refused to tear it down. Every attempt to renovate ends the same way. Workers quitting after hearing whispers in the halls or finding their tools moved overnight. One contractor said he found the guest book open on the counter, turned to a blank page, with a fresh signature written neatly in the middle. They say the inn doesn't want to be rebuilt. It wants to be remembered exactly as it was. Frozen in the night, the last guest arrived. And so it stands, quiet and waiting, at the edge of the forgotten road, a place where time and maybe something else, never truly left. Some mysteries fade with time, but not this one. The story of the last guest at Hollow Inn has only grown stronger, whispered from one generation to the next, a reminder that some disappearances aren't meant to be solved. Maybe the man never left because he couldn't. Maybe Hollow Inn wasn't just a place, but a threshold, a space between the living and whatever waits beyond. The missing name in the guest book, the locked door, the footsteps that still echo through empty halls. All of it feels like pieces of something unfinished. If you stand on the road near the inn on a stormy night, locals say you can still see a faint light flickering in the upstairs window, as if someone's just checked in, waiting for the rain to stop. Some claim to hear a man's voice humming softly, the same tune from that final night. And if you listen closely, you might even hear the creak of the stairs. Slow, patient, coming closer. The last guest who checked into Hollow Inn never checked out. But every night since, someone swears they still hear footsteps coming from room 9. A room that's been locked for decades. They say some buildings never forget the people who once walked their halls, and Hollow Inn is one of them. Sitting quietly on a lonely road just outside a fading town, it looks ordinary at first glance. But locals know better. They say it's the kind of place that doesn't just hold memories. It keeps them. It was a cold, rain-soaked evening when the final guest arrived. The innkeeper remembered the sound of the man's boots on the wooden floor, slow, tired, and heavy, as if each step carried a secret. He signed the guest book with neat handwriting, paid in cash, and asked for a room facing the forest. That was the last normal moment anyone could recall. By midnight, the storm outside had grown violent. The lights flickered, and the inn fell into uneasy silence. No one saw the guest again after he went up the stairs. But those who were awake claimed they heard footsteps pacing above their rooms. Steady, restless, never stopping. When morning came, the door to room 9 was locked from the inside. After several knocks and no answer, the innkeeper used the spare key. The bed was neatly made, the window slightly open, and the room was empty. His luggage, coat, and even his wallet were still there. But the man was gone. That was the night Hollow Inn changed forever. And from that moment on, no one could explain what really happened to its last guest. Long before it became a name whispered in ghost stories, Hollow Inn was just a quiet resting place for travelers. Built in the late 1800s, it stood on the edge of a trade route that connected small towns and mining villages. The structure was simple, creaking wooden floors, narrow hallways, and a fireplace that was always burning in the front lobby. Back then, it was known for its warmth. People said the owner, a man named Arthur Hollow, treated every guest like family. He built the inn with his own hands, even carving the name above the door himself. But over the years, things began to change. After Arthur's sudden death, his family tried to keep the business running, but strange stories started spreading. Travelers complained of doors unlocking by themselves, of soft voices whispering in empty rooms, and of shadows that moved when no one was around. Some said it was just old wood and wind. Others swore the inn had started remembering every soul that passed through. By the mid-1900s, Hollow Inn's reputation had shifted from comforting to cursed. Guests stopped coming, and those who did often left in the middle of the night, claiming the place felt alive. Eventually, only a few travelers, the desperate, the lost, or those who didn't believe in stories, dared to stay there. And among them was the man who would become known as the last guest. It was one of those nights where even the air felt uneasy. cold, damp, and heavy with the kind of silence that makes you whisper without knowing why. The innkeeper, Mrs. Wilma Crane, was about to close up when a stranger appeared at the door. He looked exhausted, drenched from the rain, and carried only a small leather bag. His coat was old-fashioned, the kind you don't see anymore, and his face, though calm, had something distant about it, like he was there, but not really there. He asked for a room, his voice quiet but firm. Mrs. Crane handed him the key to room 9, the one at the end of the upper hallway, a room that, for some reason, no one had stayed in for months. As he climbed the stairs, she noticed something odd. He didn't leave any footprints on the wet wooden floor, even though his boots were soaked. She brushed it off at first, blaming the dim light and her tired eyes. But later that night, when the storm began to rage, she started hearing noises. At first, it was faint, slow footsteps pacing back and forth. Then came the soft creak of the floorboards and the muffled sound of a chair being dragged across the room. Mrs. Crane called out, thinking the guest might be uncomfortable or in need of something, but no one answered. By midnight, the inn had grown so still that every sound felt louder, the rain tapping the windows, the wind howling through the chimney, and those footsteps that seemed to come and go above her. Then suddenly, silence. When dawn arrived, the storm had passed, but the guest never came down for breakfast. Room 9 was locked from the inside, and when the door was finally forced open, what they found inside changed everything. When the innkeeper opened the door to room 9 that morning, she wasn't alone. The cook, a young maid, and one of the local farmers who often helped with repairs stood behind her. All of them expected to find a sleeping guest, or worse, someone in need of help. But the room was empty. The bed was untouched, sheets perfectly smooth. The window was open just enough to let the cold wind drift through, and the smell of rain filled the air. His bag was still resting by the chair. Inside were clothes neatly folded, a pocket watch, and a small journal. But the pages were blank. The maid swore she had seen a faint light coming from room 9 sometime after midnight. She thought the guest had lit a candle. But when she looked again minutes later, the light was gone, extinguished all at once, as if blown out by someone standing right next to it. The cook remembered hearing soft footsteps in the hallway when everyone else was asleep. He said they moved slowly toward the stairs, then stopped halfway, as though whoever it was had forgotten where they were going. Even stranger, one of the guests staying that night, a traveling salesman, claimed he heard someone whisper his name through the wall, but when he opened his door, the hallway was empty. He packed his things and left before sunrise, refusing to ever return. When the local police arrived later that day, they searched every inch of the inn and the surrounding woods. No footprints, no signs of struggle, and no trace of the man who had checked in the night before. For the next few days, the staff stayed together out of fear. Doors creaked open on their own, and footsteps echoed upstairs even when no one was there. Mrs. Crane locked room 9 and told everyone it was best left alone. But she could never explain one thing: the faint smell of pipe tobacco that lingered in the hallway long after the man had vanished. The disappearance of the last guest spread through the small town like wildfire. Everyone had their own version of what happened that night, but the truth was simpler and stranger than most were willing to admit. When the innkeeper and the police searched room 9 again later that day, they noticed small details they hadn't seen before. The mirror above the desk was fogged, even though the room was cold, and written faintly across the glass were 2 words, traced by what looked like a fingertip. "Still here." The message vanished within minutes, leaving no sign it was ever there. The officers dismissed it as condensation, but Mrs. Crane couldn't shake the feeling that the guest had tried to leave a message. As the days passed, strange things began happening around the inn. Guests who stayed in nearby rooms complained of hearing a man's voice humming softly at night. Some said they saw a shadow standing by the window of room 9, long after the door had been locked for good. Then came the ledger. When Mrs. Crane checked the guest book to confirm his name, she found something impossible. The entry from that night, his signature, his handwriting, was gone. The space where he had written his name was blank, as though no one had ever signed it at all. The police eventually closed the case, marking it as an unexplained disappearance. But locals never believed it ended there. They said the man didn't leave Hollow Inn. He became part of it. After a few months, business dried up completely. The staff left one by one until Mrs. Crane was the only one remaining. She locked the doors for the final time and moved away, but before she did, she left a note on the counter. It read, "For whoever finds this place again, do not open room 9. He's still waiting." At first, the investigation into the Hollow Inn disappearance seemed straightforward. A missing person, a locked room, and no signs of struggle. It had to be an accident, right? But as the days went by, every theory the police proposed fell apart. The man's belongings were all accounted for: clothes, watch, money, even his identification. Nothing pointed to him running away. There were no footprints in the mud outside, no carriage tracks leading from the property, and the back door hadn't been opened all night. It was as if the man had vanished into thin air. Detectives interviewed everyone who had been in the inn that night. The maid insisted she saw light flicker from under room 9's door past midnight, yet the lamp inside was still full of oil when they found it. The cook repeated that he heard someone pacing above his room until the storm went quiet. And Mrs. Crane, the innkeeper, claimed she woke to the faint sound of humming, the same tune the guest had whistled when he first arrived. When investigators checked his background, things only got stranger. The address he had written in the guest book didn't exist. The name he gave, Mr. Elias Wren, wasn't registered anywhere. No records, no relatives, no trace of his life before Hollow Inn. It was like he had appeared out of nowhere just to disappear again. Maybe Hollow Inn isn't haunted by a ghost at all. Maybe it's haunted by a memory, one that refuses to be forgotten. So tell me, what do you believe happened to the last guest at Hollow Inn? Was he taken by something beyond this world, or did he simply choose to stay? Share your theory in the comments, and if you love stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell, because more unsolved mysteries are waiting, and some are closer than you think. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.